So let's get started.
Why is
Uh,
there a video called Pug Humping Train?
mm,
I don't know.
All right.
and
Well,
we're
I just got
live.
my
Sweet.
notification. So yeah.
All right. Oh
Sweet.
crap.
Sweet.
Yeah, you guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, good. All right, so we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for stopping by. And well, yeah, as the title suggests, the world is bleeding, and not in the fun way either. A lot of really crappy stuff is, well, I mean, a lot of crappy stuff is always going on. It's very difficult to really explain what's going on in a kind of abstract way, in such a way that, it hasn't already been said.
Yeah.
There doesn't a way to describe like every other freaking day. But otherwise, yeah, let's get started. So, first thing that came to my attention is that there's a bill being passed in the Florida state legislature.
Florida.
Florida, yeah. I mean, keep in mind, this is the home state of Marco Rubio, who, if you recall, is the so-called conservative senator who supports red flag laws. If you don't remember, red flag laws basically they make the government, or gives the government the ability to take away your firearms just unilaterally without your consent, permission, and it's up to you to prove that it's okay for you to own firearms. So basically, it's just plain gun confiscation without even the pretense of due process or innocent until proven guilty.
It's also the home state of that one mayor who had sex with one of his interns to pay off road bumps that were being built.
He's also essentially the ultimate Florida man.
He is. I mean, I think. What is it? I think Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush are the ultimate Florida men.
Florida
Also,
man.
casual reminder that Donald Trump supports the red flag law because he wants people's guns taken away without due process.
Yeah.
Due process second, but we got to take the guns before.
Oh, but you see, Trump has been very good for the Second Amendment. He's so
4D
protective.
chess. Yeah, it's just 4D chess. In reality, he's the best Second Amendment president ever.
You know, the worst
Those
part
were-
is that they're probably actually absolutely correct on that.
I
Who
mean,
knows
he's got-
what limits we're going to have to stretch ourselves to in order to convince ourselves that we weren't duped into supporting another establishment corporatist hack.
he's the galaxy brain.
He's playing 69-dimensional underwater backgammon.
This.
It's so brilliant. But yeah, this back to the topic, this law in Florida specifically. The proposal is that that it's going to become illegal for a child in Florida to post pictures of firearms on social media, and not just firearms either, but firearm lookalikes. So this could be, for example, a BB gun. This could be an airsoft gun. This could also be a Pop-Tart bitten into the shape of a gun. Anything that
It could be
resembles
your
a gun
hand.
in your hand, yeah. It could be your hand. It could be, I don't know, maybe like you're in a photo or something. You turn your hand a certain way, like you're trying to do a gang signs because you're an edgy dibba, and some
Literally fucking, you can get arrested for making finger guns and taking a picture of yourself. Literally hand gestures are what you're getting arrested for in the US now.
pretty much. And the way that this is enforced is that the child themselves won't be arrested, but juvenile, I forget what the program is called, like the Department of Juvenile Corrections, basically the people who arrest and imprison kids, those wonderful people, they're going to set up programs, and what these programs are just, it's education, or better phrased, re-education, where the parents of kids whose kids post pictures of airsoft guns on social media, they're going to be arrested and they're going to be required to take classes on gun safety, on whatever topics that the government decides that they're too uninformed on.
The bill, by the way, is called SB 1310. And here's another a doozy from that bill. Apparently, you can make the police officers who happen to find these pictures are authorized to make warrantless arrests just based on if they believe this law has been violated.
It's
It's
known as
completely fucking subjective. They
it's
don't even need proof.
it's known as probable cause, and of course probable cause has been the justification for all sorts of police brutalities. You see all these, or at least you probably don't, but we see these articles all the time, me and everyone else on the stream, where the police will go after someone who's doing absolutely nothing wrong. There's video evidence of them doing nothing wrong. I remember seeing this article just last night about police going over to examine a noise complaint. The guy answers the door. There's clearly like no loud noises being made, like no partying. So what the police do? Well, they tell the man to have a nice night and they walk away. Except they don't. They drag him out and then start beating the hell out of him.
I was
And
about
then
to
they-
say, like, if back to the way you said about taking kids out of class just to, teach them about whatever the government wants about guns. I was just like, you know what if they accidentally just encourage a school shooter that way?
I wouldn't
And
be
then
surprised. I think
yeah, and then watch them blame it on something other than the government.
I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that the person who wrote this bill has friends in the juvenile department, in the juvenile corrections department, and this is going to largely be a payoff to them, since I'm almost certain that these classes are going to be attended at the parents' own expense. So this is really just a tax.
See what they're being taught in these classes, by the way, because I can guarantee you it's not going to be even like anything which even attempts to be impartial information. It's going to be like if like the moms demand action recorded a video and that's what they were showing the kids in this class. Guns are bad because they shoot rockets out of the barrel. The bullets they shoot out like rockets, and it wants to legalize baby killer 3000s, which cause 7 million deaths every day.
No, they shoot incendiary rounds, which means they're heat-seeking.
Baby Killer 9000 just be the
You
government.
guys heard? The NRA wants to give mental patients access to free AR-22s.
I thought they were called AR-47s now.
We need to
Kind of like the
regulate EMP armor.
AK-15.
We need to-
AR-47 is the new advanced model with the chainsaw bayonet attachment.
Also, it has that it includes the bullet button, which gives you infinite ammo and unlimited lives.
Hey, have you heard about the new development of the EMP armor-piercing rounds, so that when the androids are invented, we can stop them?
I mean, good. I would think you would
I
just
don't
need Full
even know
Metal.
if you're joking or not on that one, because that
You know
sounds
the joke.
that sounds like something which actually could exist.
I mean, who knows, in the future we can have a smart pistol from Titanfall.
I don't know.
Which, honestly, I would want that. That actually is a pretty cool idea. Like bullets that just track the enemy.
I mean, do they track the enemy themselves, or do you need like a target lock?
A target lock.
Okay, good. I mean, it's like if they were just like the Needler from Halo, where they just automatically seek out enemies. But the bullets move like 10 miles an hour, so it balances
Yeah,
out.
the one point that I want to make about this is you're starting to see laws like this popping up in the U.S. It's a global phenomenon. Like, I've seen people online try and argue, oh, look at Europe, get fucked Europe. And yeah, I mean, from a superficial point of view for that moment, yeah, I'm sure that could be a little bit satisfying because they seemed a lot of European countries seem to have their own smug attitudes towards other countries and other people's politics. The same thing's happening in the U.S. I mean, that's one of the they try and treat it as if it's only happening in Europe. No, it's coming to the U.S. too. It's a global reaction that the governments are having, and this is evidenced by what's going on in the markets right now. They want absolute control over social media to make it one part harder to spread anti-establishment ideologies and actual because so many people are becoming disenfranchised that actual like movements that are harmful to the state are popping up.
And by the way, Todd Rankles drops a super chat for $15. Thank you very much for that. I think he says I think that we need to start. Yeah, he says I think that we need to start talking to people about property rights. If a person isn't using property to harm another person, there is nothing to be done. This needs to be a priority, which, yes, I personally absolutely agree on. Whenever I talk to people about guns, they usually like to frame it as a question of the Second Amendment. I always try to steer the question towards property rights. It's like, look, gun ownership are a form. Guns are just a form of property. So gun rights are property rights, and property rights are lizard rights when they're human rights too.
If you frame the only reason why you have the right to own a gun as if it just says so in my holy contract, then it makes it very easy for people to turn around and say, well, this is something that just exists because the government says so. I mean, if you don't have any principled understanding of what ethics are, and you don't even really know what ethics are in the first place, many people seem to be under the impression that logic is subjective, like unironically. That seems to be a popular idea, and that's terrifying.
Oh yeah. And I will give constitutionalists one thing, and that is that they do tend to understand that the rights do not come from the Constitution. I mean, there are a few that make that, but the actual conservative constitutionalists will not make that argument. They'll point to the actual text within the Constitution strongly implies that you already have those rights, and all the Bill of Rights says that the government cannot infringe on them. And in addition, they point to the Federalist Papers that say that the Anti-Federalists said that the purpose of the Bill of Rights is to protect the rights that we already have, and the Federalists replied to them, which I remind you, historically, the Federalists did not want a Bill of Rights. They did not want a Bill of Rights because they thought that the government that they were creating would be so impotent that it would be impossible for them to infringe on those rights in the first place. They thought that the Bill of Rights was redundant. I mean, obviously they were in great error, and thank God for the Bill of Rights, in all honesty. But
I find myself doubting that was their reasoning.
Well,
yeah, that's what because it's on record that Alexander Hamilton was a Rothschild shill, so I can almost guarantee you that was not what they actually believed. That was not their motivation behind that.
Sadly, Alexander Hamilton is no longer with us, so we have we have very little way of knowing what his actual intentions were, unless we can find some documents that maybe that are not commonly known about that indicate his true intentions. But all we have to go on is what he said in the Federalist Papers, which I think I'm willing to take him at face value in this regard. I imagine that this was an interpretation that a lot of other Federalists also agreed with. But yeah, this is their point is that, look, these rights don't come from government. They aren't bestowed upon us by imperial decree. we already have them. And
We need a government to enforce them, which is, I mean, that's their argument, and that's effectively the exact same thing. But that's, yeah, I agree with you. When I'm making actual arguments, I tend to avoid addressing the Constitution or talking about rights from a constitutional perspective. It makes it a lot harder to make your ethical arguments if you do that. I mean, it's decent for when you're like making a video and you're like trying to throw the state's own laws back into its face and show its inconsistencies, show the inconsistencies of the state. But it's not very helpful when making an argument.
I find that it's useful only as a means to an end, because what I want to do is establish some kind of credibility with people that, like, look, I know what I'm talking about. And usually what it is, like, currently I'm in Texas. The people I talk to, my coworkers, are in Texas. And there's a lot of constitutionalists here, as you might imagine. And even if you aren't a constitutionalist, you still have some respect for it. That's just the culture. So being able to speak that language makes you more credible. And then you can see there's conversation. Why does the Constitution say this? Because the Founding Fathers understood that that rights come from God, and that no government should be able to infringe upon them. And of course, this is only a partial explanation of what actually goes on, and does nothing to explain the illegitimacy of government, period. But it's at least something that they understand, and it's something that they would at least begin to listen to you there.
Yeah, I agree that if you want to get through this, if you want to get through to statists, you should start talking in metaphysical terms, but you can reference your knowledge of the Constitution to help build credibility with them.
Yeah, or just tell them that it'll make the jobs easier for the cops to kill the black people. You can just do that.
I mean, most constitutionalists are gonna be behind cops in general. That's a black pill that a lot of conservatives are not gonna have an easy time swallowing. I mean, I know it took me a while to swallow that pill personally.
Same here, but that's another point which I'm kind of glad that you brought it up, because yeah, a lot of the people who fancy themselves as constitutionalists, I mean, be able to tell you the Bill of Rights after the Second Amendment. At the very least, they don't seem to act like the other 8 exist.
Even I can barely remember like the first 10.
So I don't know what's going on with you, but every time that you speak for an extended period, we always get a super chat.
Oh, damn.
We got 2 actually. Zachary Cowley says, "Oh, but don't you know, real anti-establishment boys vote for pre-selected candidates for primaries and elections."
Yeah, and to be fair, there are some controlled opposition anti-establishment groups, which I think, to my knowledge, we've been one of the few podcasts actively warning people about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what was the other one?
The other one comes from James Meador. I'm probably butchering that name. Asks, "Are you subscribed to PewDiePie?"
I am.
No, but I should.
I am not, simply because I tend to curate my content, my subscriptions, and honestly, it's like the stuff that PewDiePie does. I like him, don't get me wrong, but it's not stuff that I actively look for.
I don't like it.
I used to be subscribed to him, but lately, but I stopped watching once his Let's Plays started to become rather obnoxious to watch.
I don't really watch those kind of videos all that often. My recommended feed's just absolute cancer right now, because I've been watching a lot of I've been looking for a lot of commentary material, and I've been looking to see from more sources what the sort of mainstream NPC opinion is. I don't really watch PewDiePie because yeah, aside from the fact that he doesn't really do Let's Plays a whole lot anymore.
I
Yeah.
watched him. I was watching him in the days of Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Back when he had like 1 million subscribers, like that stuff was fantastic.
I miss the Amnesia days.
Oh, those
Back
were the
then,
glory
he sort of
days.
had like a. Back then, he had sort of like a cool. He was cool to hate sort of appeal behind him.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I mean, he's actually become a countercultural symbol.
Good.
Yeah, I would argue, like there are a lot of shills, but I would argue that PewDiePie is not a shill because his only consistent political any sort of political message is just that the state media is bad. Be making their own content
Which is
online, and the state hates that people are doing that.
which is of course very good because you're going to have a lot of kids who watch PewDiePie, a lot of Gen Z people who are going to see this and they're going to automatically come like act under the assumption that what they're being told on mainstream media is absolute hogwash, which I mean ultimately it's not an argument, but it is still very good. And yes, Black Spruce is right, barrels. It's one of PewDiePie's old memes from the Let's Play days.
Man, I remember that.
Yeah, those were that was
Those
glorious.
were the days.
And I'm pretty sure Black Spruce also remembers Stefano.
I remember that.
Oh wait, someone already mentioned him. Never mind.
Alright.
Anyways, Todd Rankles drops another super chat. Statists for $20. Like, geez, thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
this guy's awesome.
Statists put a lot of stock into the Second Amendment. I stay away from that. Most constitutionalists are on board with the right of the individual. We have that in common with them. I am getting through to people. I am getting through to people from that.
Yeah, like I said, it's really important to make an appeal based on natural law because if you just say, well, the Second Amendment, I mean, then first of all, people who don't agree that gun rights are a thing, they're just going to turn around and say, well, without the Second Amendment, why would you have the right to own guns?
If I remember,
You know, because I obtained them. That's essentially it.
you bought them from someone who was a legitimate owner of the weapons. And I remember hearing somewhere that there was a letter that James Madison or someone else wrote to someone else. The question was, does the Second Amendment protect my right to own cannons and mount them on my ship?
Oh yeah.
And
States make the exact same argument about they make the exact same argument with property rights. Property rights are guaranteed by the Constitution. Oh, well, then property rights must be created by the state. No, property rights exist because I can demonstrate ownership of this property. I created it, or I obtained it from somebody who created it, or transformed the property in a way to show ownership over it.
I don't think the government, or I don't think the Constitution actually talks about property except in some oblique way, like how the government cannot take away property without some form of just compensation. So
yeah.
it does reinforce the Federalist point that it assumes that you already have these rights and the government can't take it away.
But yeah, just the other point why that's wrong. I mean, it's really important to emphasize the difference between what a right is. There's a misconception which is, I mean, pretty much solely perpetrated by the state that a right can basically just be whatever the state says is a right. It's inconsistent because if everything was a right, then rights would be arbitrary, and also they would require in order to actually ensure something as a right which can't naturally be demonstrated and doesn't inherently exist, you were inherently entitling people services of another, which the natural conclusion of that is slavery. So that they're inconsistent on the grounds that positivism actually creates a very overt oppression, but also rights were simply just defined by the government, then rights wouldn't exist because rights are objective. They have to be objective. That's what makes them a right.
I mean, the term right itself implies objectivity.
And I have to wonder, like, if people don't have rights, how is it possible for people to empower a government to bestow rights upon themselves? I mean, that makes no sense. I'm not going to, I don't know,
That's a question about that, Filthy. You're just supposed to listen and believe when the state says stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just wondering, it's like, I have this, I grew this watermelon in my backyard. And
we
I want,
we voluntarily gave ourselves a state in order to suppress our rights, and if we didn't have the state suppressing our rights, then we wouldn't have rights, because without the state which suppresses our rights, then we wouldn't have the ability to demonstrate our rights. I mean, just say it out loud to yourself. Jesus Christ, statism is so retarded.
So I have this watermelon that I have in my backyard, and I want to eat this watermelon. However, I need to give you this watermelon so that you can give it to me so that I can eat it. I mean, that's statism logic in a nutshell. I need to give you something so that I can get it back so I can use it.
That's about as cute as when Ecstasy said the term artificial employment. Like, you get fired just so you can get hired back. Sounds fucking retarded.
What? That's something I haven't heard before, and I like what's going on in the chat. That chicken tendies are a basic human right.
Yeah. Molly and strippers are a basic human right. Me, I'm being oppressed.
Slaves are alright. Black slaves specifically.
What's that? You won't be my slave? You're violating my human rights. How dare you?
Literally communism in a nutshell. You won't be my slave? Well, you're violating my rights.
I love statism logic. It's so delightfully absurd.
Well, that's what happens when your moral compass is based entirely on might makes right, which all statism fundamentally is.
I'm sorry, I didn't have to do that.
And it's also I mean, it all comes down to, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like, every ethical framework that isn't deontological is egoist, isn't it?
Basically.
I mean, you have David Friedman's consequentialist. You have the more honest form of statism, which is just might makes right. And ultimately, it just comes down to subjective preferences and what's good for me at the moment. Which at that point is like,
deontology would suggest the exact opposite of consequentialism, because deontological ethics suggests that the morality of any action is based on whether the action itself is right or wrong, based on ethics. It could be right or wrong. So that's the exact opposite of consequentialism or ethical egoism, because those suggest that an action is right just if you can take it.
Do you guys hear that? It's Jesus screaming in the background. Just from a very far away distance. Oh, and he stopped. Okay.
Alright, but so should we move on to the next story?
Yeah.
What the fuck was the first story anyway?
The first story was about was about Florida, and basically they wanted to put parents in re-education camps if their kids post a gun on social media. Which one other point I wanted to make?
Yeah, it's illegal to post for kids to post pictures of anything that the state deems to resemble a gun. Doesn't even have to be a gun.
One other thing I wanted to point out is that all this is really going to do is make guns cooler. I mean, I don't know if you guys had the same experience I did, but in elementary and middle school, if you had an airsoft gun or if you had a BB gun, like, you were the coolest kid in class. Like, that was just like that was something like you had to have to be cool.
How middle school and high school works. If you're doing something which the state tells you that you shouldn't, you were the fucking coolest kid in school.
So really all they're doing is creating forbidden fruit. I mean, keep in mind, it's the parents that are going to be put into the re-education camps. So students, especially like the particularly sociopathic ones, which, I mean, let's be honest, 50% of grade school kids are sociopaths. Then,
Basically.
yeah. By the way, we got another super chat from Todd Rankles. He says, positivist position grew out of the Enlightenment. It was a good thing at the time, being that people like Locke and Rousseau were telling people that the divine right of kings was bullshit.
Yeah, I'm so sick and fucking tired of people saying that liberals and libertarians are the same thing, because liberals don't even have a core set of ethical principles, a political philosophy. And because it doesn't have a core set of ethical principles, it can stand for literally anything that the particular liberal in question fucking wants it to. That's the reason why you had people ranging from John Locke to John Stuart Mill, natural law theorists, to utilitarians, claiming that they were liberals, even though those are the exact fucking opposite of one another.
And you can also have things like Sargon of Akkad and his liberalist philosophy, which he largely developed because Soygon, yeah, which he just developed because he got BTFO'd by a literal fascist. And he said things that, like, yeah, collective rights,
state-enforced individuals.
Yeah. Well, what's individualist is just what's good for the individual, because that's how that works.
That's why ethics matters.
And the fucking the manifesto that they wrote, this is a statement of principles which we know won't ever be recognized in reality, but it's alternative. So, I mean, that's all they have. We're better than the other guys. Here's a list.
Not only did he get BTFO'd by a fascist, but he got BTFO'd by one that wasn't even really making arguments.
Oh yeah,
It was
that's
just
yeah,
his statement.
He's not even, like, a very intellectual heavy hitter to the alt-righters. I mean, a lot of them fucking hate Richard Spencer because a lot of them have realized pretty much what every other critically thinking person has, which is that Richard Spencer is just a shill for the state.
Yeah.
Let's also remember that he got BTFO'd by a fucking 13-year-old.
When did that happen?
Oh, yeah, Atomic.
Yeah.
He made that video, and then Sargon actually saw the video and commented under it, and he's like, "Oh, I am not going to respond to a child."
Imagine having so little confidence in your belief that you can't reply to a child. I mean,
It's not that he's a child, it's that he's making arguments Sargon can't refute.
yeah.
Ideology so shitty that a child can beat TFO your argument.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's exactly what I wanted to say, but I can't English today, apparently.
I am the English.
Yes. So on story. So apparently the United Federation of Teachers, along with a couple of other state-sanctioned unions in the state of Rhode Island, are fighting for their right to have sex with students. No, I'm not joking.
I'm glad that recently in my teaching classes they're like, oh yeah, dating your students, yeah, that's a huge no-no.
Did they say why it's a did they say why it's a big no-no?
I think we already know why it's a big no-no and why they know it's a big no-no.
I know we
And they're
we should
specifically
already know,
talking
but
about students under the age of 16. That's they're referring to very specifically. And yes, there's an actual bill which was written. It's known as HB 5817, and it's being backed by NEARI and UFT, so the two state-backed teachers unions in the area.
well, I mean, I think this is fantastic because it outs the major teachers unions in the United States as being a literal pedophile organization. They are NAMBLA.
No, they're trying to
That's something which people. This is something which people have been saying for a long time, and people have been arguing for a long time. The teachers' unions will, whenever a teacher gets caught in a sex scandal with their students, the teachers' unions will. I mean, they'll basically just have the teacher go to a different school. Like they'll organize contracts for them to work at a different government school, and doing this for a while. And people, it's nice to see them overtly doing it. So and advocating for it, because yeah, that's just another nail in their coffin. But yeah, I'm still really sticking to. I mean, this is kind of good also because I'm really sick and tired of that straw man that anarchists are in support of pedophilia or whatever because they think that natural law is the base. That that people shouldn't be coerced. Being two 18-year-olds and having sex.
Yeah.
I mean, and that, people should actually, consent should be based on biological maturity, which is the natural law position.
Exactly.
So you've got the state unions, you got the state organizations working with kids, all turning out to be literal pedophile organizations everywhere they pop up. I mean, teachers unions, police custody, foster homes, pick your choice. They're fucking they've got pedophile rings or they're molesting kids left and right in those places.
And
in an anarchist society, even if you were to have like a foster home that ended up like the runners of the home ended up molesting kids or running a sex trafficking ring, they wouldn't get let off the hook like they do society. No, the people running that home would probably be carried out and lynched.
Ideally. One thing I do know is that I remember reading this story, not reading, but I remember seeing this story on TV of this teacher in New York City who was making six figures. Like, the guy was senior. He was caught having sex with a student. I think it was actually a rapist raping a student, underage student, and because he had tenure, they couldn't fire him. So what they did was they took him out of the classroom and into something called the rubber room. And what is the rubber room? It basically means you're suspended from teaching, but you're still being paid. So he is getting full salary, full benefits for years for raping a student while the district does its so-called investigation to see if they have grounds for firing him in the first place. Which
I've already established that they don't, because he has tenure, so he's not going to be fired.
No, probably not. And it's the same thing that I don't know if this is a saying or not, but it's the dumb criminals that rob a bank. It's the smart criminals that become the bank regulators.
That's what'll happen under a state. You can do anything, like as a teacher in a state-backed teachers union in a government school, you can do just about anything short of actually pulling out a fucking machine gun and gunning down your entire classroom. And you will not only not go to jail, but you won't even be fired.
The threshold for firing teachers is extremely high. I remember another story about a teacher in Los Angeles County who you had one student who was suicidal. I don't remember what, I think it was middle school, it's like 8th grade or something. And so the teacher, like, you had this suicidal student who slit her wrists. She ended up surviving and recovering. So she goes back to school. The teacher doesn't buy that she was suicidal. So she has her walk up to the front of the class and then show the class the scars on her wrist, which, as you can imagine, is absolutely humiliating. And then the teacher continues to berate the student that, oh, maybe you didn't do it right. You should know how to finish the job.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, shit.
Yeah,
Dude,
and
it's like...
I'll give you 2 guesses as to what happened to that teacher.
Nothing.
Oh, I already know, because what I learned is that as teachers, you're supposed to usually back each other up. Kind of like prisons. When you see an officer doing something maybe unethical, you're like, no, you shouldn't probably call out that officer, you should actually just agree with their decision. Like, I'm not kidding, like, that's what you're actually taught.
I'm pretty sure the only reason a teacher would even get fired for pulling out a gun and killing the student is that it doesn't look good politically.
That's what I think.
Like,
I'm in full agreement with that.
no, like, even if the dude's using a hunting rifle, like, they'll probably try spin it as an AR-15. Like, we've already seen stories like that, like the Orlando shooting. But they said the shooter used an AR-15. It was just a hunting rifle and a pistol.
I think the big speaking of the shootings, generally, like, one of the warning signs I look for that's a false flag is, did he use an AR-15? If he did, it was probably a false flag, because let's be honest, the AR-15 is probably the most demonized rifle because it's really scary looking. So therefore, they have the most scary looking rifle that they can get their hands on.
It's usually one of the things that'll, like, get me researching the details of the shooting. If it's immediately politicized and there are laws being proposed or passed immediately following which restrict more freedoms, would have the government infringing upon your rights more openly. And if it gets media coverage just in general, that's probably a good sign. Because there are school shootings which happen, that get covered on local stations, but don't really get outside of their local area. And those, for the most part, I don't necessarily think those are false flags, because they're not really taking the opportunity to do anything with it.
No.
And a lot of people are saying, oh, SO, you just think every shooting is a false flag. I've gotten that. And no. Maybe it's just that a lot of the ones that are covered all over the media are riddled with inconsistencies, as I make abundantly clear and as I demonstrate. But no, I'm not at all under the impression that bad things can't happen. In fact, that's why I'm an anarchist.
I'm still not sure what the deal was with the Las Vegas shooting and ISIS claiming credit for it.
Well, I still don't understand the point of the second shooter.
And the fact that you have multiple eyewitnesses and video showing the sound coming from multiple directions.
Filthy. ISIS only claims responsibility sometimes because they want to scare people because they hate freedom.
If the government has,
I mean, the government hates what freedom?
They hate American freedom.
But what freedom? I mean, the United States is under the control of a hostile occupying force. We just happen to call them the police. I don't know what freedom. The thin blue line, you guys. Yeah, thin blue line to protect us from criminals and thugs. Only problem is the police are the criminals and thugs.
We need thugs to protect us from thugs.
Sounds about right.
We need thugs to protect us from the basketball Americans.
Wait a minute, I'm pretty sure that's the mafia. No, wait a second. The mafia is actually, they actually do their job.
I actually remember Sarah Palin, of all people, explaining why the mafia is better than a government.
Sarah Palin.
And the number one reason, because they actually do what they say they're gonna do. If they give you protection, if they put you into a protection racket, they actually do protect you.
Oh, as the government has, the Supreme Court has ruled on numerous occasions, including the time that Parkland victims attempted to sue the police department of Parkland, Florida. You are not obligated to be served by the state, despite the fact that they're coercing you to fund themselves.
The police are not there to protect you, they're just there to draw your chalk outline. After that, like, what happens, cross your fingers and hope for the best. Yeah, I like the way Kevin Ham put it in the comments. Anarchy, better than mafia, better than government.
But, so, anyway, I mean, there's not really a whole lot to say about the whole union story. I mean, it's sort of common knowledge they do shit like that. How about the jobs report? You know, how the Trump administration and the controlled opposition media outlets like Fox, Breitbart, even sometimes you occasionally hear this on like the establishment, the so-called establishment media like CNN or MSNBC, where they'll pretend that they're conceding. Well, as it turns out, the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, put out a report recently about the so-called jobs boom. And it turns out that not only is there not a job boom, but there's been a retraction. There's been a net loss since the beginning of 2019 and going into the end of 2018 of 201,000 workers. Lost, by the way. So you can't blame that on automation, or you can't blame that on online sales. No, those jobs aren't going anywhere.
Wow.
It's really funny how often you have these labor statistics are put out every month, and then there's always a correction like a week or two later that always turns out to be worse than before. Oh, we just overestimated. We actually lost 2 quadrillion jobs, even though we said we got 200. Really...
Yeah, and you know the statistics of employment growth by 3 points. That's a fucking lie. That's not true.
Oh, but Esso, you forgot.
All you have to do is look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics to see this. Not only have jobs been...
Esso, you're forgetting something. Trump implemented tariffs to protect American jobs. And
off me mine, and that's something I was gonna say. I can tell you from experience that Trump's killing jobs. I specifically lost mine because of it. I was working an agricultural job, and yeah, Trump's tariffs cost me my job.
But
he took my job.
But Trump's tariffs cost jobs. It obviously wasn't tariffs' fault because you should have kept your job.
It's obviously not tariffs' fault because China... You know, it's really hilarious when they attempt... Because there's only one study which protection tards ever cite try and prove that tariffs are improving the economy, and that's a paper which was published in I think 2008 called The China Shock. And the hilarious thing about the China Shock is it doesn't even show that there's any net gain as a result of tariffs. It shows that there's a decline in employment and go up, which is exactly what fucking everyone else says.
Oh, but
What retards?
One piece of evidence which they attempt to cite doesn't even say what they claim that it does.
then
What
clearly we
retards?
need more tariffs. I mean, I talk to people about who try to defend tariffs, and I just go like this: do you believe in economic speculation, or not speculation, specialization? Do you believe that there are certain people who are better at doing something than in other things? So, for example, the classic guns and butter thing. One group is specialized at building guns, the other one's good at building butter. If they're building equal amounts, the net result is going to be a net reduction in the amount of goods available, so things are going to be more expensive. If you have people working on what they're specialized at, things are inevitably going to be better. And somehow, this universal formula, this universal economic reality of specialization stops at the national border. That somehow things are going to become more expensive if you import and export, which of course
Which
makes
is absolutely retarded.
it's insane. The idea that anyone would even seriously take that into consideration is absurd. Imagine
The
what.
idea that less scarcity increases prices
Yeah,
goes against basic economic realities.
but we need jobs. I mean, Esso, do you know how many Alaskans are put out of work because they don't grow avocados? Can you tell me? Do you know how many? It's 200 bajillion Alaskans are out of work because there's no avocado farms.
Yeah, apparently there's 96 million people which are in the United States reporting that they're unemployed, which that is fucking amazing.
96
That
million.
is-
That's almost 1/3.
Of America?
Yeah, I don't even know, like, at that point how like the economy's been able to sustain itself without collapsing for as long as it has at this point.
Can you send me
But-
that? Can you send me a link to that? By the way, I have not heard that before, and I think that's
Yeah,
absolutely.
I sent that to you before the stream.
Probably haven't. Probably
We
didn't see
need
it,
more.
but that's an unemployment rate of like 30%. And granted, it's not as high as it was during the peak of the Great Depression,
Depression.
because if I recall correctly, when you eliminate government jobs, like with the CDC, which basically paid people to dig ditches and then fill them in again, the actual unemployment rate was like 35%. But this is really damn close. I mean, you're right. How the hell does any economy sustain that, especially with the amount of money that is just circulating around the world? There is going
Well,
to be we've talked doom and gloom before about how the economy is poised to collapse, but seeing these numbers, it's like, is there any possibility that this is even remotely sustainable? Nothing that is mathematically sustainable will be.
We need more
Yeah.
jobs.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's been an increase in freelance employment and people who are making money trading in the agoras. So I'm sure that this is pretty close to the actual number of people who are unemployed in the sense that they're not making any money. But a lot of them are just trading under the table and are not reporting employment.
Probably. I mean, I know if I started making.
Even then, that's probably only like a few million people. I mean, the fact that it's even like close to 96 million still, that means that there's tens of millions of people who are sitting around just not doing anything, maybe not even looking for work, but we'll go ahead and assume that at least half of them are actually looking for work, but our economy is so fucked that nobody can find a job.
If you're in certain regions of the country, it can take years to find a job, and not even just like a career. It's like doing it being an office clerk or some other, or like a graphic designer or some other like highly competitive job. No, I mean like Starbucks barista, like McDonald's cashier, supermarket grocer. The kinds of things that like teenagers should get as a summer job. Those are not available at all in certain
And they're
regions of the
scarce.
country.
They're scarce in the sense that, yeah, most like people with actual credentials on their resume would have a hard time getting them.
Yeah.
Who's looking for a summer job.
hmm And, well, yeah, people are worried about the effect automation is going to have on employment. I mean, they're not wrong to be concerned about that, as any reasonable person should be. But look at the effect that statism has on employment. Dear God, what have they done?
The thing with automation, though, is it doesn't cause a net loss in jobs. That's why you know this, but that's why when I was introducing this, I separated automation and jobs being lost because retail is dying.
hmm
Those automation and internet manufacturing has it's increased productivity, which has put more resources into the general economy. But that's not a net loss in jobs because that actually creates more employment opportunities as a result.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we should start wrapping things up because we're getting close to an hour.
Oh, okay, sure, but were we gonna mention what's going on with OPEC?
Yes, actually,
Yes,
we should.
over that.
We should, but just let's try to make it
Sure,
quick.
Yeah, we'll make it quick because, I mean, to be fair, there's not a whole lot to go over here. But as longtime viewers of this show will know, the U.S. dollar even is able to sustain itself at this point. I don't think we need to explain fractional reserve banking, but that's known as petrodollar recycling. Do you want to explain that, or should I?
I'll explain it briefly. So every dollar that goes to the bank and then they lend it out, they have to make up the difference in your deposit, so they just print the money out of thin air.
But, so the reason OPEC comes into play is because OPEC is essentially a international cartel which is set up by Saudi Arabia and is funded by a couple of other different states, which essentially forces every UN country to trade for and euros for their oil. And that the fiat currencies in question artificial value because, they don't have any scarcity. Want them is because they're literally forced to trade for them at a consistent rate for oil. And that's a big part of the reason why since the 70s, U.S. foreign policies and some countries in Europe have been so hawkish over oil. Not more oil, it's because they need countries that are trying are trying to get out of OPEC and are trying to trade around OPEC to trade, otherwise it's going to destabilize the value of the currencies. Saudi Arabia, the main country which is holding up OPEC, is created. Can you stop, Asia? Can you mute yourself? Because we can hear you typing. So OPEC, Saudi Arabia is arguing that they're going to dump U.S. treasuries over the U.S. Congress law to attempt to allow Saudis to be held responsible for the 9/11 attacks.
I don't think it's 9/11. I think it's the, if I recall, it's actually that Saudi is being sued for anti-monopoly practices.
Yeah, sorry, I'm reading the wrong section of this article. That was threatened 3 years ago to do that because Congress was allowing the Saudis to be held responsible for 9/11. But yeah, recently it's been proposed to planning on attempting to pass a bill which would have OPEC members exposed to U.S. antitrust laws. A lot of people argue that they're needed for the purpose of breaking up monopolies, but as everyone here knows, monopolies can't form naturally. They require coercion to exist because scarcity in a market free of coercion only creates incentive for producers to enter the market. But that aside, fucking huge if they actually go through with it.
Yeah, that would basically mean the death of the dollar tomorrow. Anyways, we got another super chat from Todd Rankles, who says, I believe there are 42/47% of people that pay federal taxes. Once we get to a point of about 35%, we will all be eating acorns.
Once we get to the point where, yeah, it's even close to being like 3/4 of the population not paying taxes, you're going to start seeing demonstrable effects. You're going to start seeing agencies closing down simply because the state can't fund them anymore. You're going to start seeing more private companies forming to fill the void of those roles, and not for agencies like the CIA or whatever. I mean, like, education, it's going to be one of like the middle ones to go, but I'm just using that as an example here.
I wouldn't be surprised if the federal government, in order to make up their shortfall, starts cannibalizing the CIA and their drug money.
Oh, the CIA is probably going to be one of the last ones to go, honestly, because the CIA essentially is operating as the government's little attack dog for whatever other countries do around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Need to bring democracy to another country. The CIA is the one organizing it covertly.
Gotta love those glow in the darks. Anyways, yeah, we should wrap this up.
Yeah, so that's actually happen is OPEC could be dissolved if the to do this in the United States. And the thing is, I thought initially about this, like, okay, there's no way that the governments could be that stupid. They have some sort of backup plan if OPEC were to
collapse,
go under. But the thing is, with the influence Saudi Arabia has over European and United States politics, it doesn't really seem to appear as if there is a backup plan. They're not acting like they're in a position of leverage. They're acting like Saudi Arabia has the leverage.
Which, I mean, they do. They're single-handedly, not single-handedly, but they're basically propping up the dollar. And without the dollar, well, everything, their entire house of cards crumbles. And anyways,
yeah.
I think we should.
Okay, what were you gonna say?
Nothing. I just think we should end it here, mostly because I gotta go.
Fair enough. We'll end it here.
I have one more thing to say, and that is subscribe to PewDiePie.
Alright, but thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for the super chats as well. Those are really helping us out.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see you on Tuesday. Bye.
Bye.
I now probably should have just started playing that like immediately, like as he said that.
All I heard was shh.